A wonderful good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Everybody's fine? Yeah, so you can go crazy for the next panel, of course. Feel free to do whatever you want to do. So we are ready for our next session on the blue stage, which will be a kind of look into the future. We all know that not just vehicles change in the future, but also the corresponding homologation, which is a really exciting topic that we will talk about in just a minute. But I promise I will not tell you too much about it because we have an excellent, a wonderful moderator for the next session that I would like to introduce to you. Now, please give a big hand for the wonderful Dr. Katie Evans.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Katie Evans. I am a doctor in philosophy and an expert in the ethics of mobility at the IAAA. So you might be wondering, why would they ask a philosopher to moderate a panel like Unveiling the Future of Vehicle Homologation, Pioneering Innovation and Advancing Technology? So this is a fair question. And I'm sure most of you think that my work as an ethicist, something like deciding between whether to sacrifice a baby or a grandma in the case of an unavoidable accident. And I'm sure that almost all of you think that this problem isn't real. And I mean, you're right, because if we are choosing, I'm pretty sure grandma's got to go, right? But I'm kidding. And now that I have your attention, I think the topic of today's panel is actually a far more interesting and important type of unavoidable collision in the automotive sector. This is the one that happens when the future of vehicle safety collides with the future of vehicle software. So what do I mean? Well, let's unpack it. Vehicles are increasingly being designed to drive themselves. And this means that software is more and more responsible for the safety-critical portions of the dynamic driving task. So things like MRMs, or even object and event detection and response. On top of this, this means that the concept of safety itself is shifting in automotive from its more mechanical roots into something that's more software-oriented. In the European context, at least, the success of software-driven vehicles hinges on fast and reliable homologation. Software-driven vehicles need frequent software updates, and thus they also need frequent, fast, and continuous inspection to address things like developments and improvements in AD function or the continuous homologation of type approval relevant software updates. They might even require some fundamental changes in the type approval process itself. Things like expansions in test criteria, scenarios, assessment methods, and even what constitutes acceptable evidence. So the good news is a lot of these safety-critical software updates can be delivered over the air, which is a way faster alternative compared to the status quo. But the not-so-good news is traditional homologation methods are lengthy, tedious, and time-consuming, and they suffer from a type of regulatory complexity and lack of harmonization. So, given these stakes, virtual homologation presents itself as a viable and valuable potential solution, offering, among other things, significantly faster approval processes for safety-relevant software updates, increased assurance of the functional safety and even quality of vehicles, the possibility to leverage virtual validation as established evidence in homologation, and continuous over-the-air software updates throughout the entire vehicle lifecycle. So just as software has changed the face of safety in automotive, it might also stand the chance of changing the face of homologation. So the goal of today's panel is to take a look sort of under the hood of the future of homologation and to contribute to a larger conversation about what this future might look like, one that's already taking place amongst the sponsors of this panel, Microsoft, DSpace, TÜV T-Systems, Control, and FEV.io. So across two action-packed question rounds, my esteemed panelists and I will lay out the principal goals and challenges of the future of homologation, including what they need from themselves and each other to make it happen. All of this in a conversation so interesting, it will make all of you forget about the sunshine and even the Bavarian beer that's available just outside. But don't take my word for it. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our truly star-studded panel. He is president of the German Typal Approval Authority, KBA, and please don't ask me to pronounce the full name in German, Mr. Richard Damm. He is board member in technical development at Volkswagen brand. Here he is, Mr. Kai Grunitz. He is Senior Vice President in Automotive at T-Systems International. Let's hear it for Dr. Christian Hort. He is General Manager and Lead EMEA for Manufacturing and Mobility at Microsoft, Dr. Rupert Stutzel. And last but certainly not least, he is CEO at TÜV Division Mobility, Mr. Patrick Fruth. Okay, gentlemen, shall we start our engines?
Yeah.
All right. So my first question goes to you, Richard. So as you know, digitalization efforts in Germany are both widespread and rapidly advancing, a fact which will likely have profound effects on many industries, the automotive sector included. To kick us off, could you give us some insight into what sort of impact digitalization might have on the role of government, policy, and regulation in the automotive space, and what the end goal is? Can we expect a smooth transition? And if we can't, what are the key challenges?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. And it's a pleasure to be here on the panel. And we just learned it's a large audience compared to the other panels before. So thank you for coming here. Yeah, it's really a challenge to go forward with the digitalization. You know, the regulatory part in the automotive sector is, I wouldn't call it old-fashioned, but virtual testing, software updates is quite a new topic. And we have regulations that are more considered towards a normal testing phase and not so software related. And this world is changing, and it's really a challenge for all the stakeholders who are involved in this process, but especially, of course, governments and authorities, because they are maybe not so fast all the time compared to industry. At least that's what people think most of the times. Yeah, and it's really a challenge to bring the complexity to an easy transition. And I think it's a stepwise approach we will finally see. I think we will take several use cases and learn from the application of the new methods on such use cases before we go to a full transition of such a method. And yeah, the challenges are big, but I think it's good. And the end goal, as you were asking, the end goal is, of course, that we have an easy-to-apply regulation, where everyone understands how to apply a regulation, and that it's applied across Europe and hopefully across the world, but essentially across Europe when we talk about type approval in the same manner. I think that's also very important to have a level playing field for all the participants in the whole part. So.
Well, that is exactly what I was hoping to hear, Richard. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn to Kai, and my question is the following. Original equipment manufacturers like yourselves are certainly no stranger to the digital revolution, particularly, but not exclusively, when it comes to the increasing use of software in vehicles. Can you tell us a bit more about the effects of software on the automotive industry as a whole? And what does the development of safety-critical software updates look like over, let's say, the next 10 years?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel, because this question of how to do a homologation for safety-critical software is quite a big issue for us today. Besides the way into electric mobility, software is one of the key innovation drivers for the automotive industry. We all are talking about software on wheels, because we all think that's what our customer wants, a kind of vehicle that's integrated in their everyday life. And like on their software, on the smartphones, also the customers want software updates and in a regularly base. So that's a real issue for us because we have to develop systems and software architectures that are capable to bring these software updates to our customers. When we take a look into the future, we will see a lot of new driver assistance functions, also semi-automatic driver assistance functions like highway pilot, city pilot, and these functions are very safety critical. And I think it will be necessary to bring software updates to our customers in much shorter time than today. And if we want the authorities to speed up, we have to speed up by ourselves, and that will be a huge challenge for us.
Okay, so I see. I think everyone's recognizing that speed, the efficiency of speed to delivery for software updates, is a topic that we all are going to care about. Let's see if it continues down the panel. My next question is for Christian. So a lot of what Kai just explained will require extensive connectivity on a robust vehicle backend. I mean, quite obviously, right? This paints IT companies like T-Systems as vital players in the drive towards innovation in the automotive space. Can you tell us more about the role of connectivity and data integration in the future of vehicle homologation? How can we bolster accessibility and provide the connectivity required to ensure fast, reliable, and secure over-the-air updates?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Thank you for having us here on the stage. It's a pleasure. I mean, listening what Kai was saying, the connectivity is the fundamental essence of everything what we are doing. So, and it feels really good that we as T-Systems are part of the large mothership Deutsche Telekom, because this brings us really, really close to the connectivity details. We have intimate insights into 5G APIs and can provide superior service with that knowledge. So now, as you observed, Deutsche Telekom is investing a lot to increase the coverage. It could be nicely seen in the case of T-Mobile US, where in a very short period of time, the 5G network really covered the majority of the country. And for the topics we are discussing today, a seamless connectivity is absolutely essential. And there is a vision there which kind of illustrates how important it is. If you are in rural areas and you're missing the towers, right? It feels really good if you can see the sky, that you know that you are connected, right? Translate that a little bit in your daily life, because there will be more technologies in the future coming that you have a ubiquitous connectivity assured.
Right.
And right with our customers, we're using this connectivity to plan software releases to assure that we have in the future a good predictability of the bandwidth needed, and then book them early globally and assure really a cost-efficient software update. Or what we're also looking into is that we might have periodical technical inspection in the cars. We are really resilient and a stable connection where somebody is supervising the moment the car is doing certain maneuvers, and also can prove that the car is still stable and doing what it's supposed to do. So this is why connectivity, I think, is a fundamental element of the equation.
Yes, I think as an ethicist, what I'm hearing right there is that connectivity is the key to accessibility, which is sort of the idea of mobility as a right, that we want to design products that everyone can access and use and take advantage of, right? And in this particular context, we need to make sure that everyone that is using these vehicles is able to connect, right? That they have some kind of access to connectivity. So it's nice to hear that in this formal setting, and I think that sets the tone in a positive way moving forward. And as far as that goes, it's time for my question for you, Rupert. And so obviously, as veterans in the software space, Microsoft is no stranger to the complexity of software development. In this sense, self-driving cars present a novel opportunity to integrate virtual testing into the validation and homologation process, a technique which, of course, requires robust and reliable simulation techniques. Can you elaborate a bit more on the role simulation might play in the future of homologation? What challenges does it pose to the status quo, and what benefits does it offer?
Happy to. Thank you, Katie. It's great to be here and discuss those topics. So there is, if virtualization and virtual testing and simulation has effects both in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of the whole sort of development end-to-end. Efficiency, because we can automate steps that would require a lot of manual labor. Say, software-intensive products need a lot of updates in the course of development, and if you have to make these updates on physical products there's a lot of manual labor involved, and that takes time and it takes effort. Whereas if you can move that to a virtual space, then it's much easier and it requires less effort, and you can get faster. So that actually improves the process. The other thing is that prototypes required, and in the automotive industry, a lot of prototypes have to be built along the process in order to validate, are expensive and they're scarce. So you can save money by virtualizing. At the same time, looking sort of at the effectiveness, reducing the amount of prototypes required can actually help boost test coverage. Because if you can have, if the test instances, say the test bed is virtual, you can have as many instances as you like if you have enough compute power. And that helps to increase test coverage. And also by virtualizing, it is much easier to test certain edge cases which might be very hard to achieve in the physical world, right? But in a virtual world, you can do almost anything. So given that the models are representative and good, that can actually help improve quality. Now, what are the challenges? There's a number of challenges. Of course, you need a technical backbone. You need an end-to-end development toolchain that allows for doing this virtualization end-to-end. It should be also, in these days, AI-enabled, so you can automate different steps. You need a powerful cloud backend where you can have all the data that is the basis for the virtualization, that is secure, that is always available. And you need the compute power for running complex simulation models, because if you start simulating an entire car, that requires very powerful simulation, a lot of compute power for that. You also need, and I think that's an important aspect also in this round with you here, you need a governance concept where all the players of the industry, the OEMs, the traditional suppliers, the tech suppliers like Microsoft, the technical services, and the authorities work together to establish sort of the way of doing this, because it's not obvious how it should be done. I think we all need to find out about this. And then, of course, we need to establish a process that sort of implements all of this. Lastly, I think the most important thing, and again, what you said, Richard, before, is we probably need to approach this in a stepwise manner, and we need to start doing it and learning as we go along. And let me just briefly advertise the showcase that we're showing here of the digital loop here at IAA, which is with a whole number of partners, which will all be on the stage later, where we have implemented a small use case, but in order to show how it could be done and take this as a first step forward. And of course, let me say that in terms of the technical infrastructure, of course, we can provide, as Microsoft, we can provide the powerful infrastructure and the AI-enabled development environment that can make that happen.
Okay, that's a really wonderful and interesting response. I really liked your distinction between efficiency and effectiveness and how prototypes fit into that. I did not know that. I'm learning so much today. So, and this idea of a governance concept that's collaborative, I feel like, Patrick, this is something that's right up your alley. And so my question to you is the following. The diversity of the issues raised by our panelists thus far could indicate a complicated landscape for a technical service like TÜV to manage. As the entity tasked with the legitimization of the type approval of software-dependent vehicles, how do you see the evolution of TÜV own processes and services to meet this demand? And how do you ensure the accuracy and the reliability of the digital environment for testing and homologation purposes?
Thanks for the easy question, for the short question especially. And so I'm happy to being here, being a panelist, and we are also proud to being partner in this DigiLoop showcase as TÜV Süd. And let me start with a short answer. So TÜV Süd stands since more than 150 years for trust and reliability. So it's our role to ensure all the things which my co-panelist described, and that's also our part in this showcase. And we are also undergoing a kind of transformation. That's what you're asking for. How can we ensure also the change in our processes to be more efficient? And since 5 years ago, we founded an extra department. It's called Motion, within CTO in our company, to having an eye on the regulations, the change of regulations, but also technical-wise, what happens in the market and what will happen in the future, and to anticipate how we have to transform our people regarding the skills, but also to having the right investments in cutting-edge technology like AI or simulation tools or whatever. So it's part of our DNA since the beginning on, and so that's why I'm talking so much about transformation. Change happened all the time, so every day, but also strategy-wise. And in our strategy, we established also all these investments to make it more efficient. And I think we're standing therefore that we will be more efficient, but not less carefully. Yeah? So that's our wish here in this round for everyone, but to shorten up all the processes, because it was driven so far by very physical tests, to searching for rust, or you need a hammer, so that's the awareness which we have in the market, with a periodical technical inspection. But we also have to make sure that the software and the updates which coming on the car over the air are approved, but in a more efficient way. So if you look in the current situation, an update or an approval for an update needs 6 to 12 months, but that's the world from yesterday. So we have to change this, and as my co-panelists described, we need more speed, and that's why it's the goal also from the showcase to speed it up and talking about weeks or days or hours, perhaps. And that's our aim, and that's our part, and that's part of our transformation.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a grand challenge, but I like this idea of improving efficiency without sacrificing quality and keeping your thumb on the beating heart of the industry to understand what the changes are and how to best anticipate them in what you offer. I think that is definitely the right approach. So this sort of rounds off the first round of questions, which was meant to sort of establish the stakes and the state of the art of the future of homologation. So kind of, what are the basic problems? How are we all feeling as stakeholders? What are the grand challenges that we're seeking to address, and what are the goals? So that's nice. I think we did a good job of that. Now I want to dive into some stickier specifics. So I prepared some more pointed questions for each of you that hopefully will help you not only explain in detail from your position what you need to make a lot of the goals that we mentioned in the first round happen, but more specifically, what you'll need from each other. So I'll try to refer back to the roles of the other panelists, and so feel free to pick up on what they say and add it into your response. So here we go. My first question is for Kai, actually. And so here it goes. It's very clear that software-dependent vehicles will require software updates, and highly frequent ones at that. We've already covered that, I think. A lot of these software updates will be safety critical, but others will reflect changes in regulation, the rectification of anomalies, or system changes requiring new type approval. This implies not only a great amount of complexity, but also the need for a holistic approach to regulatory compliance and a high degree of traceability of software components. So in order to tackle this problem and provide safe, secure, and timely over-the-air updates to your customers, what sorts of tools or processes or even developments will you need from some of the stakeholders represented on the panel here today?
Okay, as you said, we need to bring updates to our customers more frequently, and if safety critical, also in a very, very short time. And for that, I think we need a tool chain that really combines every step that we take in our development, not starting with the testing itself, but starting with the requirement management, going over application of the systems to the testing, Rupert mentioned it, and ending up also with the homologation process and certification itself at the end. And I think for this tool chain, it's necessary to have much more simulation and virtual elements and tools than today, because we still rely on that what we have learned on hardware. And I think that's a change of mind. We have to go much more into virtual elements. And for example, one of these virtual elements could be a virtual environment, because if we go on with our driver assistance functions, we need a virtual environment to test these functions. Rupert already mentioned that not every edge case can be done every time or should be done every time and tested in the real world. For that, we need a virtual tooling. And this virtual tooling has not only be trusted in by the OM, but also our stakeholders, our customers, and the authorities have to trust in this virtual tool chain. And for that approach, we need also a certification for these tools, a certification for the processes. And in the end, it's very important that our authorities accept that the results coming from these virtual tools are the base for the homologation and the certification.
Okay, yes, I think I'm going to bring this up a little bit later with Richard, but there's something to be said about not all tests, maybe they shouldn't be physical, right? That we actually stand to gain some safety, if not ethical considerations, by keeping things in simulation. So this is really interesting, and I'll come back to that. But in the meantime, my next question is for Christian. So given the complexity that was just elaborated upon by Kai, it seems that software update management systems will not only need to handle a significant degree of complexity, but they will also need to tightly track the reality of the vehicles that they act upon. So one potential path forward that I think we all know about is the use of digital twins in the virtual homologation process. Can you tell us a bit more about how this works and how it could be leveraged by some of the actors sitting here today?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity. So a digital twin, first of all, is a real sharp replication of a physical object, in this case, the car. And ideally, it contains the state of the car at the push of the button, whatever KPIs you're tracking. So to give you an example or an order of magnitude, we in TIS Systems, we are managing more than 30 million cars at the moment. And each of these cars do stand in for a certain part of a digital twin, right? There's a broad definition of digital twin, but some of the key data, which Kai already explained, those are part of the digital twin concept. So now what we're doing with the digital twins is, it requires a lot of compute from Rupert. We need also a lot of storage from Rupert. And we will also then have the confidence that you're approving at the end what we're doing with the digital twins, which is that we put them really in a virtual environment, which is really a massive step forward. I just imagine that you run on one server farm with heavy compute, a full stack of algorithms against an artificial environment. We call it artificial ground truth. So now, almost by a click of a button, you can change that artificial ground truth into a new driving scenario without waiting. Once the fog arrived, when the heavy rain is kicking in, you can do that in the simulation world and saving, as Rupert already explained, a lot of time and a lot of engineering skills to get things done fast. So if I'm looking around at our strong digital loop concept, I mean, we sorted out a lot of things and put a really strong concept together. Now the audience might ask, okay guys, what's stopping you? We have a high maturity already. We will evolve that maturity, but it has to come together. I mean, everything has to come together there. And we touched up on a lot of technologies, but at the end, we will need to collaborate, which is in the IT world, the buzzword at the moment, being it open source or being it in a context like this one, that we solve the problem and not the authorities are dictating something by law, which would really be a shame for us. And this is why we are standing up for coping with this challenge by the use of digital twins, by the use of technologies, and hopefully we solve it very soon together.
Wonderful. Okay, there's so much to unpack there, but
I saw you took notes.
As fast as I can. But it sounds like you talked a lot about what you might need from Rupert, and that just suits me perfectly because my next question is for him. So software-driven vehicles already leverage cutting-edge artificial intelligence techniques to achieve their performance goals, such as object and event detection and response, or even the performance of the DDT itself. We've already established that simulation will play a major role in the homologation of such sophisticated vehicles, but surely other technologies, such as generative AI or even augmented reality, will have a role to play as well. So could you tell us more about how your technological expertise could be leveraged to expedite OTI software update homologation, and how these technologies could support the goals mentioned by some of our panelists?
So happy to. So generative AI can help along the entire process, from starting with the requirements process, where generative AI methods can be used to extract requirements and help extract requirements and support, say, from regulations or legal texts, and prepare them for review, of course. The generative AI will not be able to sort of define the final requirements, but it can take a lot of the workload from whoever has to do that task. One thing that's well established already is using generative AI in writing and testing code. We already have products in the market that do that, and they're well proven, and of course that's also a way of helping along this way. There's a lot of documentation then in the later stages that have to be made, and again, generative AI can be used to assist in these processes and generate those documents, which then have to be finally signed off by somebody, but sort of preparing a version can be automated. And I think these are all good ways of sort of easing the process and reducing the workload, because as we all know, regulations are getting more and more, and somehow the workload has to be managed. At the same time, you mentioned AI that's used in self-driving vehicles or automated driving. Of course, the data that's used in training machine learning models then should also be used for validating those models. And again, then it should be the same sort of cloud backend where the data is stored that then will be used in order to validate and then homologate those models and those algorithms. I think what's very important and for all of those steps is that the whole industry arrives at a joint state of the art, right, which we can establish, and we can also agree on how these things are being done. This state of the art, and this includes a fairly complex problem that is not necessarily tied only with virtual homologation, which is that as machine learning trained or deep learning trained models are deployed in the car, we have a sort of a non-deterministic version of our non-deterministic product that we can then need to validate also with non-deterministic methods. And that also has to be agreed upon. That's not a new problem. I mean, the industry has understood that this has to be tackled. But again, for all of this, a state of the art has to be established and agreed upon so that everybody knows what they can rely upon when this is done. And so I think the methods are there. They are powerful, and I think they're well understood, and they're actually well established. I think that there's a lot more that can be done with generative AI that is not productized yet, where the technology is there and the solutions can be built, and we all need to think about how we can apply this in a way that it helps, making the process more efficient. But in the end, if we want to make sure that this can be used also in homologation, we have to also probably jointly resolve that challenge of what the state of the art is.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm noticing how much the concept of cooperation and collaboration comes up with the panelists, which I think is really refreshing and enlightening. And I hope it'll continue towards the end of the panel. To this end, my next question is for you, Richard, and it's a bit of a tricky one. So I think you've noticed that our panelists have done a good job of pointing out the many ways in which the capacity and performance of vehicles is changing, right down to who or really what is driving the vehicle. So it stands to reason that such a fundamental change in performance will be accompanied by an analogous need for a change in how we test, validate, and type approve these vehicles. For instance, real-world testing, as we've said, while important, does not and perhaps should not cover certain dangerous testing scenarios like MRMs or even accident mitigation for safety and even for ethical reasons. So in this sense, do you anticipate a change in the sorts of evidence that could be considered as a valid basis for testing and approval? And what could stakeholders do to bolster confidence in simulation and virtual testing?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. That's really a little bit tricky one, but I tried to answer the different parts of your question. So I haven't mentioned it yet. I think I'd like to thank TÜV Süd and its partners to bring this showcase digital loop to the IAA and to bring it up. Even if it's a showcase up to now, it's triggering a discussion that is important for the whole topic and the whole area of type approval, as we are in a transition phase towards a more software-defined car, as we heard from the different panelists so far. And simulation, virtual testing will become a key technology to test systems. I always use the example of a safety belt, which can be tested very easily. When you take very complex systems today, like driver assistance systems or braking assistance systems or automated Auto-Messe systems, it's like a black box. You have a lot of software in it, and it's updated regularly, and how are you going to test it? I think you can, of course, do a test, but you are always aware it's just one test you're doing, and there are so many more cases and situations that can happen in the real world. And therefore, virtual testing is becoming a key technology. And what we have to do is trying to build up competences on all of the sides, and that's not easy to do it on your own as an authority or as an OEM. I think you need to collaborate, as we just heard before. You need to collaborate with partners to come up with solutions. And also in the international community, we are discussing about the different columns for testing in the future. And one column is, of course, the virtual testing. It's coming along with the track testing and real-world testing, but as you just said, Katie, with your question in the introduction, some scenarios cannot be tested on the road, neither on the test track. And even then, most of the systems are geofenced. So even if you would go on a test track, it's not so easy to get the system to run on a test track and being not in the ODD, which is what is designed for. So there are a lot of challenges, but I think we are ready to tackle this and start the activities, and therefore, thank you once again for triggering this. And yeah, as I said before, it will be a stepwise approach, and we are looking forward. An important thing, last item, important thing is, of course, the transparency. I think the early engagement of the different stakeholders in the process of such developments is very important. I think it's not the case where you can accept a black box being presented, just having the results next to it. You need to have some insight from a very early stage, especially for the technical services. This is not an easy task for OEMs because it's about intellectual property rights, it's about the confidentiality and so on. So that's not easy, but we have to tackle it together, and I'm quite optimistic that we will see quite some progress within the next years.
This is very encouraging, and I think that it points to this larger problem of the fact that the vehicles or software-oriented vehicles drive differently, reason differently, react differently than human drivers. And so we see as we're investing in this technology how everything must change to adapt to the weaknesses of, for instance, non-deterministic models, problems of classification, all these sorts of things. I also love, Richard, how much you gave me a segue into my final question for Patrick. So you practically introduced it yourself, but I'll do it anyways. So TÜV Süd has maintained a laudable reputation as a neutral organization that acts as an interconnector for automotive stakeholders, ensuring balance and prioritizing the safety of humans and the environment. Nevertheless, the future of homologation is almost necessarily collaborative, requiring, for instance, the pooling of testing and scenario-based resources and the sharing of sensitive and typically private information across stakeholders. So how does TÜV Süd aim to navigate the delicate balance between confidentiality, accuracy, safety, and reliability in its vision of the future of vehicle homologation? And perhaps most importantly, how do you save time doing it?
I think you see it on a panel here, that, and it was mentioned also by Richard, nobody can do it by himself. So it requires a high expertise in each of these jobs of the tool chain. And that's why it's an increased partnership is required to bring this kind of showcase in the real world. So that's one point. And our job or our part is, and our approach rests on three fundamental pillars. That's trust, data governance, and shareholder engagement. And we make sure with the protocols and all the things we can bring in, that it's a robust partnership, that the transparency is there. But first of all, if you start with a showcase, it's based on trust. So you need the right partners, and I think we are the right partners here. And you have to start with something, and then to bring it on the real world, we need also substantially a partnership to show it on the street, on the road. And that's what we're doing here, also outside. But that's the first step. And lastly, the part of to make it sure that it was also mentioned with all the data streams, which is one thing from Microsoft, but everybody delivers data. Can also be a kind of data trust center or something where we make sure that every stakeholder bring in his own data and on a safe way, which is on a trustworthy way, that we have the confidence. We are confident that everything is in the right storage, and also that we can use it in this showcase for each and every one of these partnerships.
Okay, well, this is a wonderful way to wrap up what I think was a very, very successful panel, if I do say so myself. I noticed some emerging themes, and I'll talk about them in maybe 10 seconds so that we keep to time. But like I had mentioned, obviously collaboration and communication, which turns into trust and transparency, is a key takeaway from this panel, since I think everyone is recognizing that this problem is not solvable alone, and it requires relying on the expertise of a lot of different stakeholders, some of which are traditional to automotive, others are maybe newer, right? I think also what stood out was that the novelty of the technologies that we're implementing in these vehicles has profound implications for whatever else we do with them, whether it's testing and validation, homologation, whatever. So coming to terms with the tools that we use and how best to test them, I think is a tricky part into the future. And I could give 10 minutes on this, but I'll stop, because what we need to do right now is to get everybody up on stage for a group photo, which I warned you guys about. And in that sense, I'd love to invite our partners up. So from Microsoft eSpace, TÜV Süd, T-Systems Control, and FEV.io. If we could get the people up on stage, I would love for us to close out the panel that way. And as we're doing this, let me just thank the panelists for their wonderful contributions to this fascinating conversation, and for the audience for their time and attention. Let's.
Thank you, Katie.